I've made this video as a follow-up to the video I made introducing my script for making smooth surface shapes in FreeCAD. It shows a few examples of what can be done with the script, starting with the simplest possible file. After watching it back, I thought it could do with a bit of an intro, so I've added this bit on at the start. It's a quick overview of how the script works. To make a surface, we need to set up in the input file a grid of points that have a rectangular topology. We'll fit curves through these points and then surface patches between the curves. So in this example I have a grid of points 5 by 7, and I join up the lines in one direction, which I call sections, so I have 5 sections, and the lines in the other direction I call ribs, so here I have 7 ribs. And then I will determine which patches I want, and I'll make a Coons patch for each of the patches that I want. So in the input file we define a section as a set of points, and then however many sections we want, we repeat the points, same number of points in each section, and that defines this rectangular topology of points, and that can be wrapped onto any surface shape. Then we define which lines, which curves we want to create. We don't have to create a single curve for each section. We can split the section into two like this and have one curve on one part and a different curve on the other part. When we do that, it means at the join there'll be a discontinuity in slope. So in this case, in this example, we've done that for the last 2 sections. Then we can do the same thing in the rib direction. So we just define the curves that we want in the rib direction. And then those can also be split if we want them, or continuous curves with continuous slope all the way along the curve. And then we define which patches we want in that topology. We don't have to have all of the patches, we can select individual ones or certain areas. But we must define curves between all of the points. We can't have any gaps between points. So that's a quick overview of how the script is going to work and what the input file needs to look like. Now on with the video. This is a video explaining how to use my script for making smooth body surfaces in FreeCAD. I'll just get straight into it. The first surface I'm going to make is going to be the hello world of this script, the simplest possible implementation. So this is going to be a patch that is just made from 4 points. So I have the 4 points at the bottom here, these 4. And this is the simplest possible file that you can use. So just a quick run through here. So the first line is just a title. You must have a line that's a title. That will be stripped off. So if you don't put that line in, it will strip off something else. So the first line must be a title. The next line is defining the number of sections and the number of points per section. So the simplest possible thing you can have is just 2 sections and 2 points per section. The next line defines the number of curve definitions. So we're going to have 2 lots of curve definitions here. So the next 2 lines are curve definitions. Now one thing I forgot to say in the original video was that you must define curves for all of the points. So we have 2 types of curves that go around a section and curves that go along points between sections that I call ribs. So we must define all the section curves and all the rib curves. If we don't do that, the patches won't be made properly, or the script will just crash. So the first line here, which has a 0 at the start, this means type 0 curves, which are section curves. So this row defines the curves for all the sections. We only have 2 sections, so we do 1 section 1 and section 2, so all the curves between 1 and 2, and we do all the rib points between 1 and 2 here. The next line defines all the rib lines, so these are curves of type 1, and we go from rib 1 to 2 and section the points 1 to 2. The next line is defining how many rows of surface definitions we have. So we're just going to have one. And we're going to make patches that go between sections 1 and 2 and ribs 1 and 2, which is effectively just one single patch. And then we have the 4 data points. So this is the simplest possible file, just 2 sections, 2 points per section, curves between all the points, and then one patch between those 4 curves. Now, I've set up the script in a toolbar here, so I have my own ITT extra workbench toolbar, so that all of these files here are in, all of these icons are in that toolbar. So the script is under this button here. So this runs the script. I'm going to select the first test here. And you see that it's just a simple single patch. It's not a flat surface, but it's just 4 points. So all of the what we called curves are actually just straight lines, but there's some twist on the panel. So that's the simplest possible curve that you can make. Some of the other buttons I have here that I find quite useful is this button that just deletes everything so I can start fresh, and then I have a couple of buttons that clear the report view in case there are messages in there that you want to clear the Python console as well, so we've got a clean start. So next I'm going to go to this second patch test, and I'll show you what it looks like before I run through that. So I'm going to patch test 1. Now we have multiple patches. It's useful to think of the way the script works as if it's making patches in a topology that has a number of patches in one direction by a number of ribs by a number of sections. So in this case I've got 3 sections, and I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points per section. So I'm making surfaces from that. But actually, if I show all of the lines here, all of the curves that I have, actually defined here is a topology that has 3 sections that has 8 sets of points. But I've only asked for these 8 surfaces to be defined, to be created. So I've got the ability to create all these surfaces, but I've only asked for some of them to be created. This is still a fairly simple geometry. I've defined some sections, I've defined some ribs, and made some strange surfaces. So to define that, this is the file. So again, I have a title at the start. I have 3 sections, 8 points per section. Again, I'm just going to define all the curves. So I have 2 lines to define the curves. The first one to define the type 0 section curves, where I have sections 1 to 3, so that's all the sections, points 1 to 8, that's all the points, and the 0 means is not periodic, so it's not a closed curve. Next one is type 1, which is ribs, so I want all the ribs 1 to 8, covering all the points 1 to 3, again not periodic. So that basically is defined the 3 section curves and the 8 rib curves. The next one is to define, or the next thing is to define which surfaces I actually want, because I can select odd surfaces. I don't have to get the surfaces for every possible patch. I can even select individual patches if I want to. But here I'm going to select from sections 1 to 3, so 1, 2, 3, and then from ribs 2 to 6. So this is 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And that creates just the surfaces that I've asked for here. Next one, so I'll get rid of that one. Coming up. Next patch test is number 2. Okay, so in this example, I've got some closed curves. So, but you can still think of it as a topology of so many sections by so many ribs, but they're just wrapped around and closed on the ends. But you can still unwrap this and think of it as a kind of rectangular topology. So here I've got, at this end, I've got a closed surface where the slope is continuous all the way around. So this is a periodic curve that's been closed with matching slope. At the other end, you can see I've got still a closed curve, but the slope doesn't match here. It's discontinuity in slope there at that point. So in this example, I've got 2 periodic curves where the slope matches and 1 non-periodic curve where the slope doesn't match. The way that looks in the file is, again, I've got a title, I've got this sections, 3 sections, 8 points per section. This time I've got 3 lines defining the curves. The first one is a section curve. It's just section 1. So it's just this first section. I'm just defining the curve for this section. It goes from point 1 to 8, and it's not periodic. So it's not periodic, so it's not got enforced slope here at this join. That's where you get the discontinuity here. The next line is sections 2 and 3. So that's section 2 here, section 3 here. In this case, I'm going from points 1 to 7, not to point 8. The last point, point 8, is repeated here. So the 8th point is a repeat of the other points. So I only go from points 1 to 7, but then I make the curve periodic, and FreeCAD closes from the 7th point to the first point, closes the curve on these 2 periodic sections. It closes the curve with equal slope at the join, so no discontinuity in slope. So I have one section that's not periodic and 2 sections that are periodic. And then for the ribs, I just have all 8 ribs along the sections 1 to 3 and not closed, so not periodic. And then here I'm just asking for all the surfaces, so all the patches between sections 1 to 3 and ribs 1 to 8. Okay. Next example. Test 3. Starting to get a bit more complicated now, so time to create the patches is getting a bit longer. I haven't edited this though, so that's the real time that it took to create this kind of weird looking surface. Again, you can think of this as kind of rectangular topology, but I've wrapped some of it round so that it joins up. Actually, the first part of this, the first three sections, is one of the early examples that I just showed you. I think the test one. The second part of this on the right-hand side is the closed example that I just showed, and I've just added the two together with a join in the middle. And you can see that some of the sections here are closed, so the last point is equal to the first point. Some periodic with slope continuous, and some not periodic with discontinuity in slope, and then these parts not joined at all. So you can see you can get quite complicated and weird shapes even in a single input file. So the file for this one, I have 6 sections and 8 points. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sections, 8 points. Just 3 sets of curve definitions. 1 to 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4 are not periodic. 3 of them are not closed at all. This one is closed because the first and last points are the same, but it's not periodic, so the slope is not continuous there. So I have sections 1 to 4, not periodic, all the points 1 to 8. And this one, sections 5 and 6 are periodic, and I only specify points 1 to 7 because FreeCAD closes the 7th point to the first point with a slope equalization, so I don't need to specify point 8 here. Then for the ribs, I'm just having all the ribs defined non-periodic. So all the ribs, sections 1 to 6. And then I'm just saying all the surfaces I want patches between sections 1 to 6 and ribs 1 to 8. And then these are all the data points. So this is a pretty complicated surface. Starting to test the ability here to make a smooth surface. I can just check how smooth it is by switching off the lines. The capability a little bit, but it's very, very distorted here. So where you have very distorted shapes like this, you start to get some wrinkles. And where the shape is a bit more reasonable, so on the end here, it's nice and smooth. Okay, finally, let's just clean up a bit first and then take a quick look at one more case. So I'll run the script again. And select this one called patch test. Just to show that we can pretty much wrap this rectangular topology onto any shape we like. Here's a almost fully closed shape. It's not quite fully closed. It can't be fully closed if it's a rectangular topology, but it just has a tiny little hole here. That it's closed. But that's a rectangular topology mapped onto a kind of spinning top shape. Let's take the lines off that. It's pretty smooth. Okay, that's the end of this video. I'm planning to make a few more videos in this series. The next one will probably be about the Kuhn's patches, how they're defined in FreeCAD, how you can examine them and maybe modify them. So watch out for that. See you next time.